The Stranger Beside Me by Ann Rule is the ultimate Ted Bundy book. Now, I listened to this on audiobook, but it was the abridged version, which is only 3 hours long. I listened to it all in one go, and I was like, why is this so short? And then I found out the book was 400 pages, and it was like, oh, the abridged version, because it was only 3 hours, but an hour's around 50 pages, and I'm like, 150 doesn't equal 400, so I already wrote it down. So I had to read the full book before the end of the year because I already wrote it down on my master list of books I've read this year. So this book is really like in depth, mainly because, you know, Ann Rule, she is an ex-police woman. She's also a crime writer. So she has all of the background, but she also had the unique experience of being a personal friend of Ted Bundy, Theodore Robert Bundy. And she's able to describe what he's like as a person, because she, you know, they worked together at a crisis center trying to save suicidal people. They would work in tandem, tag team, because while one person is talking with the person who calls in, you have the other person calling 911 services to show up to, you know, stop them. And Ted Bundy also, you know, we get a lot more detail about his life, his growing up, you know, his childhood, and like, you know, what sort of maybe caused the compulsion for him to go on his killing sprees. But it focuses less on the grisly aspect and more on the victims, all the different people involved, like judges, lawyers, policemen, the families, her personal, you know, moments with Bundy, from working with him to his background, doing some digging, finding out what's going on with his legal cases. And we really get a fascinating look, very similar to My Friend Dahmer, graphic novel. Someone who, you know, has a personal, knew the serial killer, has a better, you know, perspective than someone who just did a lot of research about it. But the book is really, really absorbing. I couldn't put it down. It starts off with Ted in Florida after his escape, and then we jump back to, like, you know, how she met him, what she was going through at the time, you know, what he's like as a person, his relationships, and the sort of large things that happened to him, and then caused him to, you know, sort of lash out at young, beautiful women. And all the different victims, you know, there's really creepy, almost like a horror novel, the way he would like use his methods. The methods that he'd use were used in other movies like Spoorloose, The Vanishing, and Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs, using the fake cast and the wrench and everything. Those were based off of Ted Bundy. So we get to know about that. And like, he was a user of women, you know, he was one of those charming sheep, or a wolf in sheep's clothing, you know, like if you ask him about the game, he'll know all about the game. If you ask him about you know, a topic, he'll pretend, you know, he sort of like can go into any situation, asks to borrow money, doesn't pay it back, you know, has lots of women admirers all the time, really smooth and charming in the moment. You know, a lot of people just didn't really see him as, you know, capable of doing violent crimes because he fit in so well. And he had like a bright career going ahead of him because he went to school. He had his girlfriend Meg Anders paying for it, really. He was on his way to being a lawyer or a politician, and he was like on his way to, he was a very charming, smart, intelligent man, which is just something that a lot of people just can't get their heads around. When someone says serial killer, you think of some grungy guy and like a wife beater, you know, like keeping people chained up in the basement, but he was more of a frenzy killer. And there is a really grisly part where they describe the sorority house killings that really like made my stomach churn. But other than that, though, the book is just so fascinating because you really get the sort of insight into what he's like as a person, and you know, the ways, I mean, there's like some other stuff going on under the surface too that you have to surmise. For example, why did he keep Ann Rule around? Why did he like keep correspondence with her and send her letters and stuff and keep her in the loop? Mainly because, you know, Ann Rule thinks that he wanted her to sort of, you know, immortalize him in a book of sorts. He knew that she would give him a fair shake in this book, so that's why he allowed her. And she also sent him commissary money, of course, but I think part of him kind of knew that she was writing a book and wanted, you know, a fair spotlight, and that's why he didn't just cut her out immediately. And then there's also some weird psychological stuff going on with Ted himself, because there might have been a small part of him that wanted to get caught, which is really strange because You know, you think most serial killers are all about self-preservation, but whenever he was out walking around with a cast and trying to lure women into secluded areas so he could attack them and then take them away and kill them and do terrible things to them, he would use his real name. He'd walk around and be like, oh, hi, my name's Ted. You know, he could have used any fake name, and that wouldn't have, like, it really came back on him because, you know, you don't have to use your real name when you go out stalking for prey, and that was a dumb thing for him to do. But also, when he initially got caught, he was driving around Utah, and a cop pulled him over because he looked suspicious, because, you know, he was like, you know, I've never seen this car before, and Ted just gunned it. Instead of just letting himself get pulled over and being like, hello officer, what's going on, and pouring on the charm, he just straight up gunned it and tried to outdrive, you know, a police officer in a Volkswagen Bug. And then he tried to lie and say, oh, I got lost, and I was watching The Towering Inferno at a drive-in, and the cop knew that that wasn't the movie that was playing, and it just sort of snowballed into like a car search that led to him being put under the microscope, and that ultimately got him caught for all of the murders. But, you know, like, why would you act so irrationally while you're on the hunt? You know, like, there's just some odd, you know, behaviors coming from Ted, because, you know, he was so adamant in court of being innocent and like putting on this facade of like, I'm being railroaded, but in his actions are, you know, they portray what he says, because he kind of seemed like a man who wanted to get caught and stopped. He couldn't stop himself, so he purposely, like, he didn't, like, you know, send an anonymous letter to the police, you know, but he definitely didn't work 100% to not get caught, which is just a very strange thing. This book is just so insightful, so absorbing, a little disturbing, but also fascinating, and, you know, it's never boring. This is a really, like, a whirlwind ride. You know, it's not every day that you have someone who's experienced in writing, you know, be the friend of a serial killer, a prolific, famous one at that. So The Stranger Beside Me was an amazing read. I gave it a 5 out of 5.